lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It's Lay's podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be discussing The Monkey, which was released February 21st, 2025, exclusively in theaters. Now, Rowan, last time we discussed Osgood Perkins, a new release, that being Longlegs, you actually missed out on the discussion.
Yeah.
So I want to know, are you familiar with Osgood Perkins' work? What do you think of Longlegs? And most importantly, were you looking forward to The Monkey?
Yeah, I was pretty excited for The Monkey in general. I did miss out on the Longlegs episode, but I thoroughly enjoyed Longlegs, and I think I talked about it on an episode. It was like one of the more crazy
You probably did, yeah.
theater experiences I ever had. I was pretty excited to see this. I was also very familiar. Osgood Perkins does a lot of stuff for Shudder, so he was one of the architects of Queer, I think it was called Queer for Fear. It was a documentary just about like queer horror cinema, and he was like one of the ones that I know he was definitely one of the main interviews in it, but I think he also had put it together as well, or helped put it together. So I always enjoyed,
maybe like a producer or something.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed like kind of listening to him discuss horror. He's got like a very interesting aspect, obviously, because everyone knows his family history here and stuff. I'm gonna assume so. Inundated with horror from birth, and kind of given the mantle. Hey, I've just always found him an interesting director, so I was super excited this, and for better or worse, I am always kind of excited for a Stephen King adaptation, because when they're bad, they're bad. When they're good, but they're always kind of interesting. And it's been a little while since I've seen like a fresh one, but the last one I saw that I'd never seen before was with you, Graveyard Shift, and I had quite a time with it.
Yeah.
So seeing the trailer to this, I was kind of like, oh, this could be fun. I was kind of hoping deep down maybe there was a good Pepsi sponsorship going on in this also. But
if only.
What about you? Were you pretty pumped for The Monkey?
Yeah, I was looking forward to it. As we mentioned, Longlegs came out within the past year, and now he has another movie in the hopper that'll probably be out by the end of this year. So this guy's churning out a lot of work, and what I'll say is, like, most of it is at least technically competent, or at least pleasing to my eye. I know a lot of people complained about, like, the center framing of Longlegs, or how, like, restrictive, like, the 4:3 aspect ratio was, but largely I kind of vibed with the movie. The only really issues with it was just, it was a little bit slow. At least in retrospect. I'm sure if you go listen to that episode, I probably had like some other complaints, but it was just kind of like not exactly what I was expecting and a little slow. So yeah, I was looking forward to The Monkey. I saw the trailer a couple of times in theaters, and this one looked like it was going to be a little bit more fun. Like it was almost going to be like gonzo horror. Like they were really leaning into like this monkey murders a lot of people in the marketing, and all the kind of like homages to like other classic horror movies. With like some of the posters and the marketing, just neon over there, like absolutely killing the Osgood Perkins marketing whenever he has a new movie coming out. Like I remember for months leading up to Longlegs, it was all the rage, and then The Monkey, although probably not quite as successful, it was still like everywhere. I felt like it was on an opening like Thursday preview screening, it was still like largely pretty sold out. So like a lot of people here, like at least at my theater, were very much looking forward to this one, and I was among them. So now, did The Monkey make for a killer horror flick? Well, before we get into that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
Wait! Hello, brother. The monkey that likes killing our family. It's back.
Holy!
Jesus. Here comes trouble.
The Monkey was written and directed by Osgood Perkins, and the story is as follows. When twin brothers Bill and Hal find their father's old toy monkey in the attic, a series of gruesome deaths begin to plague those around them. The siblings soon decide to throw the toy away and move on with their lives, but when the monkey returns decades later, it brings with it all that carnage. Now, here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on The Monkey?
I think we can throw one into the good Stephen King adaptation pile here. I thought this was interestingly shot. Osgood Perkins, like you said, has a very distinct kind of I don't even know how to describe it. In my brain, I think of it almost I don't know why, but I want to say a OCD. Everything's very just particular, very proper. Even things that are a mess are just very properly aligned and have this kind of flow to it.
Yeah, kind of like how some people describe a David Fincher movie where there's this, this precision to kind of everything that it's some people find a little bit oppressive or overbearing to where it's it kind of feels like there's not really too much life in the movie, almost like it's been rehearsed to death almost. And when I'm watching these movies, I do feel a little bit of that, but I also just think there's a very deft touch behind the camera here.
Yeah, and I mean, I really like that style. So, to me, it's very, aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Now, as for the performances, I have no idea. Theo James, I had no idea if I've seen this guy in anything or...
Yeah, I think he was in some YA stuff 10 years ago.
I'm looking now. He was in
movies.
Divergent movies.
Yeah.
I never saw those or anything.
I read the first couple books of those because, at the time, I think I was just getting into reading. It was before my English degree.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, a couple of friends in my friend group were reading largely YA stuff, the Hunger Games or the Divergent books, or there was a couple of other handful of series there. But yeah, I recognize him from that, I'm pretty sure.
But yeah, I mean, I thought the cast was really good in this. We had the Adam Scott, Elijah Wood cameos. I'm always excited when Elijah Wood pops up because another guy that's just so involved in horror that
yeah, is that spoilers?
No, I don't think
okay.
so.
All right,
I'm not telling
Spoiling
you what he
cameos?
did.
All right.
I'm just saying these guys are in it, man. And I didn't even realize that She-Hulk herself in it.
Yes, I think she was pretty great in what she was in. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
She's obviously the mother, kind of when the kids are just growing up. So just by the nature of the story, where we skip ahead so far in time, she's not really in the movie a whole lot. But I thought she was great as that maternal figure in their their childhood.
Yeah, and just really good job at feeding into just this really odd world that we're living in the film and dropped in. Everything's a little off. People
right
just,
from the right from the cold open, you know what sort of movie this is, and we didn't talk about explicitly how our audience was. Like I said, that I had a pretty full theater. But this was the sort of movie where people were filtering in for the first 30 to 40 minutes of the movie.
That's wild.
And you can just tell people weren't getting it in my theater. There was a lot of whispering amongst the people oh, this is so stupid, or this sucks. It was the sort of thing where I felt kind of awkward laughing along with it because I felt my theater didn't really get it. And I think that's largely because if you're not there in the beginning, for that cold open, or for the bits of narration, because it's told from kind of the point of view of the older I think it's Bill, kind of looking back, reflecting on his childhood and this this fucking monkey that has just caused so much pain and havoc in his life, and it's told very tongue-in-cheek, this very black comedy sort of vibe. So if you miss some of this opening narration, I think you're probably going to be very confused as to whether or not this movie is just really campy, if it's really bad, is this corny, is the monkey supposed to be scary? It's very much a tonal whiplash if you miss the first couple minutes of this movie. No joke, I would say probably upwards of 15 to 20 people did in my audience, because for me, this movie didn't have a lot of previews or anything leading into it, ahead of it when it started. It was, I think I saw 2 trailers and it started. So literally it was starting probably 8 minutes after showtime. So people were just coming in with their popcorn, trying to find their seats, talking, not realizing the movie already started, that whole, song and dance.
That must be because it was you went and saw it yesterday.
Yeah, the preview screening, I guess. Yeah, usually
I felt there was
there
extra trailers in mine.
Oh, really?
It was definitely 25 minutes into the start time before it started.
Yeah, I know it was being marketed as showing some other newer horror movies like attached to this movie. Like I think like the trailer for Together, the new Dave Franco, Alison Brie movie that just got picked up at Sundance was supposed to be attached to this, as was like another couple of big horror
I didn't
releases,
see that one, but
no, you didn't see that one. For me, it was only Drop and then Bring Her Back.
Oh, ours
looks
was Bring
excellent.
Her Back and Opus, and I don't know, a bunch of other ones that weren't horror movies also.
Okay. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where it's just like, you have to be there for the beginning of this movie. Like, it literally sets it up pitch perfect, and even somebody who's like allergic to camp, at least I understood what tone he was going for. I wasn't like here like 30 or 40 minutes in the movie, like basically being like, am I supposed to be laughing at this? This is kind of stupid, or oh, that kill was over the top. It's like Osgood Perkins knows what he's doing, and you're either on its vibe or you're off it. It's just like,
totally
it's probably
off
gonna,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, and the tone is so interesting about it, and I thought it worked so well, especially because I feel like so many people are gonna go into this with how popular Longlegs was.
Absolutely.
And I thought it was interesting because I can see a lot of people that maybe don't necessarily, aren't going to all the horror movies or whatever, like, are going to be like, what the hell is, like, going on here? Like, this is the Longlegs guy. But to me, I don't know how you felt, but I was like, there's so much connective tissue between this and Longlegs.
I kind of felt that as well.
Yeah.
Like, Longlegs, it's one of those movies that for a good portion of it, you don't know if it's supposed to be like silly or quirky or a bit strange, right? It really isn't until like the third act where it fully goes like, this is what sort of movie this is, and it's very much not what most people would expect getting into the movie. Or like, the over-the-top performance of Nicolas Cage in that movie, where some people find him really unnerving, but it is also like so like performative and theatrical that it is kind of campy and kind of funny. And I think largely what it is that Osgood Perkins is just a weird guy. I think, like, when I was watching this movie, I won't say if it fully worked for me or whatnot yet, because we're still just kind of riffing, but it was the sort of thing where it was like, okay, he does have a singular vision. Once again, there is a very, very, like, careful tone in this movie. And yeah, when I was reflecting on Longlegs, there's, like, little quirks in that movie, such as, the main character being, like, telepathic, that barely comes up in it, or like how the world of Longlegs is like, they know about telepathy and they kind of like, search for it in like the FBI and stuff, but it's never really addressed. Or like, I don't want to fully spoil Longlegs, but some aspects of like the demonic possession, like being like basically the evilness being like contained in like an orb or something, right? There's like these weird little quirks of the story that kind of betray like this overbearing, elevated horror vibe that you would expect going into Longlegs. In The Monkey, he kind of doesn't really ever let you think that it's going to be like this incredibly buttoned up, stuffy horror movie, but it is done still like very technically proficient the entire time, which if you're just glancing at the movie or you're like taking in only like a couple minutes, you might think it's that sort of movie. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, and like I said, that's why the tone is so interesting, is because, like you said, of that like technicality and a movie that's kind of silly, and like you said, like this very particular black comedy kind of campiness like isn't usually attached to something that looks like this in presentation. And I thought that was just like, it was such an interesting take on it. Now, I will say I've never read this Stephen King story. I'm not sure. Obviously, the toy monkey is like kind of, I know I can think of the book cover, like, because I believe this is part of the Graveyard Shift. That's like the name of the short story collection. And I think these are in the same book, but I remember
I know I definitely
book.
started reading that collection. Like that's definitely one of the few Stephen King short story collections that I own. Yeah. But it's probably like everything else I've started reading within the past 10 years, where it's like, I read one or two stories and put it down, or one or two chapters if it's a novel.
Yeah, so I'd be interested to see how, obviously these can't be like super faithful because you're blowing out like usually a short story from Stephen King of like 20 pages, and you're turning that into an hour and a half long movie.
Yeah, I would think that the short is probably just, the first third or the first 30 minutes of the movie, probably like with the boys growing up, I would kind of assume.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would assume too, and then he builds out from it. And I think you can kind of tell that from, I'm sure we'll talk more in the spoiler section, but like, that even though the whole thing kind of stays with this weird, quirky tone, like there is some tonal shifts that you can almost see the seams of like two stories being put together, and that expanding of another story. The other thing I kind of noticed that normally I think my history with stuff we talk about, obviously, this has some music in it. We have like some old music. There's like some synth music in it, like some kind of like synth pop music going in. And at first I was, really thinking hard about it because I think just Osgood Perkins kind of aesthetic and style, like this is one guy I don't mind using the old music because I'm like, oh yeah, it goes with this kind of like weird black comedy carnival feeling he's like kind of giving you.
Yeah, this is the sort of movie where for large portions of it, it almost feels like kind of out of time.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, the Theo James character, for example, for a long part of the movie, he dresses very dated and like doesn't use like, a smartphone or something until, eventually he does. But it's the sort of thing when you're watching it, it's like, it almost feels like a period piece for a lot of it just by the nature of like what people are wearing or the cars people are driving or like the rundown motel that they're staying at with like neon lighting and whatnot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of aspects to it that it almost reminded me of like an It Follows in a sort of way, just in terms of it being like this story that's kind of trapped out of time.
Yeah.
Now this one very explicitly, if I remember correctly, gives dates, but for a lot of it, it feels like a period piece.
Well, and I agree with that because, I kind of thought like, the chunk of this that's like set in the 90s, I was like, none of this actually like feels like the 90s. Like,
no,
there's there's a couple references that, like, I guess you can say it here because it's not, you're talking about like posters on the wall, but like,
exactly.
There's like a Goosebumps poster, like stuff like that, but it's just like kind of the stuff the kids are saying aren't really 90s. It's like, the music used in this whole section is like kind of like old, like big band music.
Yeah, this whole section almost felt like it would have been set in whenever The Shining is set.
Yeah.
Like that's this opening scene like in their childhood. But yeah, it's supposed to be the 90s, but I agree that largely outside of a couple of posters, it didn't really feel like that to me.
Yeah, I just thought, like I said, I was beginning to say that normally this would kind of bug me, especially where then we get like synth pop music later in it, and like there's kind of like a switch up in music also, and then it'll bounce back and forth. But I thought it worked, honestly. Like I thought the music was fantastic in this. You're always gonna win me over. I did note that when the credits roll at the end, we kick into some Sam Cooke, who's like an all-timer for me. So I'm like, this is amazing. But, just really, really working well on all cylinders. And to go back to, not just naming people who were in it, but I thought the performances overall were really, really well done, like for this kind of movie. Now, I'm interested on your opinion on it because I'll say this now, and I will back it up further as we proceed to go further and further into this film. But the one movie I really thought about as I was sitting there at the end of this was Malignant. I really, really thought about Malignant and how I feel maybe this movie will have its place like afterwards, after the theatrical run. And of course, thinking of Malignant, I automatically think of Colton. And
the number one Malignant hater.
Yeah. So I'm just like, I was so curious on what your like initial thoughts on this were.
Yeah, so like technically a lot of it's working for me as well, and I actually do thoroughly enjoy kind of like the cold open and that first section of the movie where it's told from like the childhood point of view. I think that is when the movie is most effective in merging kind of its like bleak, kind of quirky, like crazy tone with, once again, like the point of view of children, right? Where there's aspects that maybe they're misremembering, or maybe like, oh, this is just exaggerated, or maybe it's scarier just because they're a kid experiencing it. There's a little bit of leeway there where I think when the movie jumps ahead to is it 2016? Where does it jump ahead to?
So it was 1999, wasn't it? It was
Okay.
1996 maybe. And then it said 25 years later. So that would be like 2020. Like, yeah, that would be like 2020.
So,
like, I think it's like supposed to be pretty
so it's
modern.
Pretty much modern, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'll say is when we jump ahead there, I'm into it a little bit, but for me, I very much didn't like Theo James in this, like at all. I thought he was terrible. It was the sort of thing where he reminded me of, God, I forget his name now, but the father in Trap. God,
Josh
everyone's gonna hate
Hartnett.
us.
Josh Hartnett.
There you go, Josh Hartnett. Yeah. So he reminded me of Josh Hartnett in Trap, where it was kind of like I understood what he was going for, especially in the nature of like his performance. Like there's a lot of duality in like what he has to do in this movie. And some of it worked better for me than others, but it's like he's kind of like playing this like Clark Kent character where it's like, oh, I'm so ho-hum and I'm a loser and, you know.
He's
I got
way
a set
too
of glasses
attractive
on.
for the part.
Exactly. Like he's supposed to be this schlubby loser that his whole life pretty much there's been like this lingering trauma just, you know, over him. And, you know, it's like this guy is like, you know, has a great diet. He's hitting the gym, you know, 5 times a week. Like, you know, it's the sort of thing where he's way too much of like a Hollywood actor, I think, for me to believe this character. And then also kind of like what the movie's doing, there's this forced kind of father-son drama and like reconciliation and bonding and honestly all of that I thought was awful. So it's the sort of thing where it's interesting because I think the beginning of the movie was so strong, and I think this movie for me is like an absolutely great movie if it's just essentially like It Chapter 1. Where it's like we're just focusing on the kids for 90 minutes and like this mayhem of the monkey and them not knowing how to deal with it, especially like with their father not being around and stuff. But where this movie goes specifically, where there's probably an hour spent with Theo James and his son, played by Colin O'Brien, I just really didn't like both of them together. And a lot of like the way they played off each other, I didn't think it didn't fit either tone. Like it wasn't like a horror tone and it also wasn't like silly enough, I didn't think. It was just this weird tone where I felt like they didn't 100% like nail what they were trying to do.
I thought the chemistry I just thought the chemistry was really off between that father and son relationship.
And I think like it is supposed to be awkward and obviously a little bit forced, and, you know, Petey very much like resents Bill, and, you know, Bill has some reasons as to why he isn't around. It's just, yeah, it's like you're forcing two characters that essentially don't like each other to spend a bunch of time with each other, but it's also not awkward enough where it's like consistently comedic. It's just like kind of sad, kind of weird. And I think this is probably like more so where like Osgood Perkins is kind of working out some of his own like, you know, parental issues with a lot of this stuff, where it's like he probably didn't have much time with his father or like his father very much. And,
yeah,
you know, it's like if you read up much on his upbringing, it's quite tragic. How everything shaked out, and like obviously he probably didn't have the best upbringing, so I think a lot of it is kind of like similar to his own upbringing. It's just in the movie itself I didn't think it really worked. And what I'll say is that it has like so many kills. There's so much carnage. A lot of it is pretty creative, even if it does get like kind of like explosively, you know, bloody and gory, like over the top.
I saw a count of 22, and that wasn't including like everybody in the end deaths.
Yeah, there's quite a few that kind of play out throughout the course of the movie. I do have a list of myself. I don't know if it actually goes to 22, but, you know, it is something that maybe we can address in the spoiler-filled discussion. But despite having like that high of a body count, it was just still the sort of thing where it dragged a little bit. And I think it's just because, once again, that it's you know, drilling into that kind of like this family drama for the last hour, and then there's also a character in that last hour that I absolutely hated. You know, I said that I didn't really like Theo James and his son, but there's another character that is very important to the third act of this movie that I just, you know, literally I thought was like kind of like too ridiculous. It was like the movie completely jumped the shark, and it was like from then on out it was getting like worse by the minute for me whenever that character was on screen. But yeah, I mean that's basically all I have to say for the spoiler free section. Is The Monkey something that you would recommend people go and check out and
yeah, I think so. I had quite a good time with it in the theater, and quite a few people in my audience were like laughing throughout it all. So
That's good, yeah.
I didn't feel, like a psycho when I'm laughing also, even in tense moments or what, gory moments or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a fun time. I think it's quite a little spectacle for Osgood Perkins. And yeah, what about you? Would you recommend people go see it?
Yeah, I think I would as well, but just with like the caveat of like go with some friends or like a sort of group that would get this sort of movie. Like that was the thing for me where, like I said, there was a lot of my audience that didn't really understand it, and it felt like kind of irritating to like overly laugh at the movie.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, there was probably like another 6 to 7 people in the theater that would laugh when I would laugh at the movie, but basically everyone around me wasn't laughing, and I felt like that person who was ruining the horror movie, like laughing through the scares, even though a lot of this movie isn't remotely scary. It was just, I felt like an asshole to the people around me because they weren't laughing, and I don't think even really enjoying this movie whatsoever. So yeah, it's like if you can go with like a group of people that understand this movie, I think you'll probably enjoy it a lot more. And if you can't, maybe wait until it comes out on streaming. I don't know, unless you want to be the one loner weird guy in the theater, cackling by himself just on that Thursday night. I didn't really want to do that to my audience. So yeah, it seems like both of us would recommend that you check this one out in theaters, especially if you have some like-minded folks to go with you. And with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for The Monkey. We are now in our spoiler discussion for The Monkey, so if you've not seen The Monkey, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, you mentioned a couple of the cameos here. My very first spoiler-filled thought was Adam Scott's feature in the movie as the boy's father. I don't know if you had a specific point where you wanted to start, but I thought the cold open was pretty fun.
Yeah, I thought it was super funny. I mean, I love Adam Scott in general. So, what a good, if he's going to be in a horror movie, this is kind of the tone of horror movie. He needs to be. I think I've only ever seen him in like one other one, and I remember it was really terrible. I can't remember what it was about, but pretty sure it was about like his wife being pregnant with like the Antichrist or something, but it was like a full-on slapstick comedy. I think it went like straight to Netflix like years ago. I feel like it was called like Hell Baby or something.
Oh geez, okay.
And I remember it like it wasn't very good. It was very early in like Netflix doing their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously he was in Krampus that we watched a couple months ago, and apparently, looking at his letterbox here, he was in Piranha, but I mean, I don't remember Piranha for anything else other than a couple of like double D's in the movie. But, I really like this cold opening as well, where essentially he's playing like the boy's father, a pilot, just trying to get rid of this monkey. And it's like this very manic, kind of confused opening where he's at a pawn shop trying to sell this as quickly as possible. And of course, it's almost like
Final Destination.
Final Destination. Yeah, exactly. Where it's like the movie is produced by Atomic Monster, and it's like literally like the submerged like harpoon guy from like almost like the Atomic Monster logo, shoots the shop owner, rips out all the intestines of him. It's like a completely over the top opening that like culminates in Adam Scott with a flamethrower just burning the monkey and like cackling, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know if you can get like a better tone setter for the movie than this. It's like weird, a little bit of like tinge of horror in there, but it's like so over the top and gross and gory and like comical that it's kind of like, okay, like, this is just gonna be literally a kind of an absurd, like wild ride sort of movie. So like I knew what we were getting into immediately with that with that cold open.
Yeah, well, and I think it was interesting, talking about Atomic Monster, because with everything, I just like, it's almost like I kind of want to see more from this pairing, because I was like, there's so much of this that I'm like, man, this seems like so one influence, but then I can also see like, but the one influence is like also kind of like pulled back a little by Osgood. And I was just like, it's such an interesting like dichotomy, because I mean, obviously, anytime we've ever talked about James Wan, like I'm not a huge James Wan guy. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is how I'll like my Wan, like when a little more like auteur directors are like channeling his vibe and his look. Yeah. And now, like I said, obviously in the spoiler free section, I was like, because of the campiness of it,
Malignant, yeah.
Malignant, and we'll get into like all the twists in the end, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is like full on Malignant 1. Like, let's try to recreate, something here. But yeah, this cold open, like, fantastic. It kind of gets you into what you're going to get into, which, like we said, is like, it's really kind of just like a little more adult Final Destination going on.
Yeah.
And I also thought the actual monkey looked fantastic. I thought it was really well designed. It was like, creepy. Like, I was like, the eyes look so good. And
yeah, I don't know if you've seen Toy Story 3, but in that movie they have like a symbol monkey that's like very frightening, and they kind of like focus on his eyes and whatnot. And it's funny to say, but like they did a really good job of that in this movie. I liked how like tactile the like build up to actually like drumming was, where he'd like spin the drumstick in his hand, and like oftentimes he'd raise one of the arms and, you know, get ready to hit. There was like always a little bit of tension there on whether or not he was going to like strike the drum or if he's going to, you know, rattle off a beat. But yeah, I just thought it looked great. I don't know if it was all practical, but like if not, then it's like damn fine for the entire movie. And it's like the movie never kind of like breaks the conceit, more or less, that it's just like a wind up monkey. Like you don't find it like chasing people or anything like that. It's just like kind of like this totem that like heralds that death is coming, essentially. And I really like that. For the movie, I thought it was great, and especially like kind of in the moments in which, like, you know, the children are trying to destroy it by like dismembering it, and like this black blood is oozing out, or I think they like beat it up again later in the movie.
Yeah,
and the monkey he always returns. He's always fine, you know. And I liked it. It's kind of like this quirky thing that, yeah, it's just like this arbiter of death in this like little furry package that I thought was pretty great.
Did you read up about the like Toy Story 3 thing and the right issue they had with this?
No.
So I guess if you're listening to this and you're not reading it up, I did some reading up on it. So essentially, the original monkey toy in the story, in Stephen King's story, is the toy that is in Toy Story 3, which he actually hits symbols. And okay. They couldn't get the rights to it because Walt Disney has the rights to that toy because of Toy Story 3.
Interesting. Okay.
And the reason the director of Toy Story 3 put that toy in there was an homage because Stephen King is his favorite writer. And he was like, I put it in there referencing this monkey story. And so when they had to change it to drums because they couldn't get the rights to put it into this horror movie they wanted to make.
Okay.
Which I think is fine. I think the drums, like you said, building that tension works a little better than the cymbals. You would think a weird thing like that wouldn't really matter, but the more I thought about it, I was like, I think the cymbals would have sent it too campy, where the drum is a little more bass. It's like a little more build up for that tension.
Yeah, you can control the pace in which the drum beat is accelerating, right? It could just be a single beat, or it could be a couple, or it could be slowly rising in speed and intensity. So yeah, I mean, it might be a happy accident. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then the fact that like this monkey was just called the organ grinder monkey, I was just like, oh, you know, this once again, the movie is just like winking at you for so much of it. If it's not in like the explicit little, you know, kind of references like that, or, you know, winking at you like that, it's also like in a lot of the performances, especially in this earlier section where like Tatiana Maslany just has like this long like monologue when the two kids are like eating ice cream about death and about how it's coming for all of us and we're all gonna die and all of our pets are gonna die and everyone in the world's gonna die, and basically it's like this incredibly nihilistic monologue about like essentially nothing matters. And it's just like, you know, the look on the kids' faces as she's like delivering this is like so priceless.
Yeah, well, I thought, and this was where she really shined, because like throughout her time in this, like she's always saying like weird little things that you're like, oh, you like probably should never say this to a kid. And like I said, I don't know the story, so then I was kind of like, oh, is she like, I don't know, like a serial killer, or like is she like a murderer or something, like, because she kept mentioning like death and stuff like that, and how, you know, like I think she mentioned a few times like, oh, I wish I could have killed them, and like all this kind of stuff. And then like you said, I thought they did a very good job, especially when they're dealing with her death as kids and as children, where you see it's actually like two separate things almost, of like, you know, we get the blood-soaked aneurysm, but then we
Yeah.
get the other scene where it's like she actually like just says something sweet and then dies, and that like childhood fantasy versus fiction way is the narrator
Which one is it?
reliable.
Yeah.
And the other main note I really had was I can't really think of another movie that so many bodies have exploded on impact of things or things impacting them. Like a lot of exploding bodies.
Yeah, there's a lot of just over the top gore effects in this everywhere, essentially.
They look great. Like they look pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, obviously I have a list of just kills, but it's like so over the top, but like, yeah, off the top of my head, it's like obviously the real estate agent gets like a surprise gunshot and just like
Explodes.
she's missed it. Yeah, it's not even like a headshot, it's just her whole body, I'm pretty sure, is gone. Or like there's a man who's like injured in a hunting accident. That's the uncle, right? Like who Osgood Perkins is playing himself. Like they show that and it's just like literally like pie filling, I think they describe him as. Like,
and he was fantastic.
Disgusting.
Like I was like, obviously Osgood Perkins is there to say this is the tone of the movie that this is what you should be taking away from the movie.
Yeah, he reminded me of Starburns from Community because he has like these incredibly impressive sideburns that almost like blend into, I think it's like his mustache or maybe a goatee or something. I can't remember what it is, but it like cramps up his face entirely. He looks like so comedic. And then there's like a hard cut to like the reveal of his death that I thought was like incredibly well done. Like once again, if somehow you missed like the babysitter dying is very comedic, and then the mother dying isn't really comedic, but like there is like a very like somber beat that plays that is almost like so awkward that it's comedic. And then it's like, okay, the uncle is inherently comedic. It's like if you're somehow getting through like the first 20 minutes of this movie and not understanding the comedy, it's like, it's like you're just on a completely different vibe.
Yeah.
And once again, there's numerous movies that we've covered on probably even this show, but definitely the main show where camp is like, at the forefront, and I'm always conflicted on it because I never know if it's an intentional choice on the filmmaker. This, it's like incredibly intentional, like the entire movie, right? But yeah, I mean, in terms of gore effects, they're just all over the place. There's like a woman diving into like an electrified swimming pool where her leg gets launched. There's, there's like a decapitation of cheerleaders on a bus where like everyone loses their heads. There's a bunch of like ridiculous stuff throughout the course of this movie that I don't know if it ever like really surprised me too much, to tell you the truth, because it is the sort of thing where after the first couple they're so over the top that it's like you're kind of expecting it. But there's definitely a lot of gore on display here if that's what you're here for.
Yeah, I think if you're kind of a gore hound, you're gonna appreciate this. I know in my audience, there was like a row of teenagers, and they were having the time of their life with this.
Nice.
I don't think I feel I was getting the vibe they didn't really know what they were going to see. It was just kind of, they came in like maybe like 3 minutes, like not too late, but like 2 or 3 minutes into the movie. And they, whether or not they bought a ticket to be there, I don't know. They just kind of shuffled in and kept low. But yeah, like once it started going, they were like hooting and hollering, like in a good way. Like they were just loving it. So, salute to those guys. But yeah, I thought the kills were fantastic in this and kept, like I said, like everything looked good. Like I don't know how much was practical, how much wasn't. But even though it was like so over the top, a lot of the time it never broke it for me. Like the camp where I'm like, oh, this is like too much. Even the ridiculous stuff I thought was like funny or original enough, like the
vape getting caught in this kid's throat.
Yeah, the vape or like the wasps or whatever going into the guy.
That was insane.
Which was like, obviously that was probably the most CGI'd thing. But even with that, I was still chuckling because I was like, this is just like wild. And it's awesome that he would think this, like, that's not something a normal person would think. This is how we're going to kill someone on screen.
No, not at all. So yeah, we've been kind of talking about the kills quite a bit, which I agree. They are largely fun, even if a lot of them in the latter half of the movie just kind of like jump the shark. It like kind of like the wasp kill, like you're saying. It's like so over the top and stupid that, at that point in time in the movie, I'm like not having as much fun with it. And largely it's because of this Theo James character, which a lot of it in the early parts of the movie, you have to buy into this sort of character that it's like he fathered a kid, but didn't want to be involved in his life at all because he was worried about the monkey resurfacing at some point and inadvertently killing him, or, maybe having to pass that trauma of death around him onto his child. This idea of inherited trauma, which, I think every single horror movie nowadays has to play with. But also there's like so much weird aspects of this character. There's like a dream sequence where he's kind of like falling into this kaleidoscopic, kaleidoscopic sequence where I was like, what is happening? It felt like the movie was like melting for a second, and there's like a stripper monkey during it, and all this sort of weird
monkey
shit.
hand picking him out of bed.
Oh yeah, that as well. Where I was just like, what are we doing here? And then ultimately culminating in just like Theo James's, twin, his other, where it's like, I think this movie is probably stronger if the twin dies in the first third, as well. And that's like the final like culmination in like why we have to get rid of the monkey because it killed my twin. But this movie brings the twin back. Like, obviously he doesn't die, but it's like he comes in as like the mastermind, the big villain behind the rest of the movie, and he's still wearing his funeral suit that he wore as a kid, and he altered it so he could still fit him, and he almost has like this haircut from Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber.
It's wild, yeah.
And like the performance is like so over the top and corny and goofy that I was just like, I was like allergic to it. I fucking hated this performance.
And to me, this was the Malignant turn where I was like,
yeah,
this is just so wild and so reminiscent of like just the Malignant like twist where we go like total wild. You're like, okay, like not only does he have a twin, but this twin like is basically a supervillain from like the Unbreakable world or something. Like he's just
who has
like
been searching for the monkey for ever since the moment he lost it. He crawled back down the well and only found the turnkey, and then set up like a phone service under the name Miss Monkey. So if people were because he's missing the monkey, or the monkey's lover, and it's just like all of it is like too absurd that I don't think this movie can really support it. And that's kind of like,
I like how you had it set up on all the TVs too. It kind of looked like Joker from Death in the Family run, which like there's an iconic scene where he has all the like the old black and white TVs piled. It's like this altar, like it was wild. So this is where I have an interesting proposal for this movie. Do you think this would have worked better if Theo James and Elijah Wood switched, and Elijah Wood played the dad?
Yeah, I think it would have been a better movie. I still don't like this idea of like the duality of the two characters, of the twins, and like how goofy, because like Elijah Wood with like a bowl cut and wearing an ill-fitting child suit still doesn't fill me with confidence that this is a great character. But I do think that Elijah Wood fits the more kind of typically like what you would cast for someone who is like, oh, okay, they never fully grew up, or they had to grow up too fast. They never got to experience childhood. So they're a little bit weird, a little bit awkward. And he's not like this traditionally like handsome heartthrob, right? Like Elijah Wood doesn't look like he's deadlifting, twice his body weight,
Well, and to me, like, even if you don't like the twist, to me, the twist still works better because it's also, like you said, Theo James has a bad wig on and a very tight suit. Funeral suit. Like, he's still super buff. There's not much of a transformation, like, even though these guys are twins, that I'm like, it's like, oh yeah, this guy's got a real rough, like, he's crazy, but he's still also a model. I'm just not buying it. Where I was like, to me, like, Elijah Wood dressed crazy might be a little more
it's better. It's better. It doesn't make the movie like inherently like that much better in my opinion, just because I like there's just fundamental issues with like this whole third act to me where it's just so over the top and insane that it's like you're either, like I said in the beginning of the movie, you're either on its wavelength or you're not. And for me, I was on its wavelength for probably about 20 minutes, I would say, of the adult section. So I would say a little over half the movie I was into it, and then it was like kind of like this slippery slope. Like, no joke, as I was watching this movie, I was like, man, this is great. I was like, I like this better than Longlegs for sure. Like, as I was watching, like, probably the first half. And then the more and more it went on, it's like, oh, we're spending more time with Petey. All this is like not very well written, and it's kind of stupid, and it's a lot of like just talking around in circles and basically being like, I'm intentionally lying to my kid, and a character is going to walk up 5 minutes later and expose that lie, and I just look like more and more of an asshole to my kid. And it's like, yeah, it's goofy and it's funny, but it's like, it's not really that fun to be watching in your crazy, cursed monkey movie. And then, yeah, it's just like this Theo James having this, hideout in the old telecom building where it's like set up like as if he's the Jigsaw killer, like, swinging axes and essentially like loaded shotguns and samurai swords hanging and all this shit. It's just like, okay, we understand that the whole point of this is to culminate in like this crazy over the top kill as soon as we see this shit. But it's still like, it just, once again, it just strains any level of plausibility when I've already bought into like a wind up monkey being an arbiter of death, right? For some reason, this goes too far and it kind of like irritates me. So it's the sort of thing where it's like, I do like some of how, what happens. I like the callback, for example, of the bowling ball kill that it's like, he fantasizes about as a kid, and it is his mother's bowling ball that gets, the one over on his kind of asshole older brother in the end. But it's still like, I think the movie is just more successful if you kill off that character as a child, and that's kind of the impetus of like getting rid of this monkey because it's like ruined his whole life and killed those around him, even that he kind of loves to hate, and we don't have to deal with the weird twin with a wig and shit of it all. I just very much didn't like that. Did you like that part of the movie, or
I also agree. I think the first half is the strongest part of this movie. It didn't turn me off as much because I was just kind of like, for the same reason, I like *Malignant*. I was like, this is kind of ridiculous. It's like, silly. I was getting a couple good like chuckles out of it, but I do agree. Like, it was just a weird, because there was such a specific black comedy tone for so much of the movie, and then like I said, it just twists into like what I would expect James Wan to do, and then I'm like, oh, that like, I don't like this as much. And like, I found even the aesthetic, even the grading, the color grading of it, everything, it was like very, I was like, oh yeah, this like looks like a James Wan movie. Like,
interesting. I never specifically noticed that near the end, but I wouldn't be shocked at all that it like goes a little bit more surreal and a little bit
I just thought the coloring was off, like very blue and reds, and like with the TV screens and stuff, and I just thought it was an interesting switch because I was like, so much of this movie is like so stylized and like what I'm envisioning as Osgood Perkins aesthetic, and like, there's like always great shots with like interesting, like, pattern wallpapers places and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then, then we're just kind of like ending the movie off in this like dingy, generic villain cave, this empty warehouse or whatever. I'm curious what you thought though, like of the actual ending, like when they're driving out. You're kind of seeing like, kind of the monkey's grand masterpiece of like, we had the plane fall out of the sky and it killed all these people all at once, but we see the town's essentially just been like demolished. You brought up the cheerleaders being decapitated, but then we also get, because multiple times in this movie, our like protagonist is, talking about like the white horse and the pale rider and stuff, and then we actually see that, which like, I guess visually I was like, cool, but I was also like, I guess I don't really, because even though this is like an absurd reality we're in, like there's nothing like this monkey's doing Final Destination deaths. I'm not seeing like demons or the devil or anything, but then we get this guy that, has like black demon eyes and he's just riding around town.
Well, yeah, that's the thing where, once again, it's kind of like Osgood Perkins just being weird. And sometimes it is weird for weird's sake. Like, for example, when you're kind of getting the monkey's wrath inside of like the telecom building, there is like a plane crash and it winds up being like the skydiving newlyweds that like crash through the roof. And for a second I was like, what on earth? Why are these people in a wedding attire? And then I was like, oh yeah, it said like there was one joke about how skydiving also has weddings for like in this world or whatever, and I was like, very good. But yeah, like you know, I like the going through town, seeing like the guy impaled on the surfboard, or like the woman pushing a baby carriage with the carriage on fire. Like a lot of these like little quick snippets were like very comedic, and like my audience was laughing, you know, along with a lot of this stuff. But for me, yeah, it's like the Pale Rider, like literally seeing one of the like horsemen of the apocalypse, like death on the horse. It's like, it's just a bit like much. Like I didn't like it personally, but once again, I was kind of out of the movie by this point anyways. So it was like, it wasn't like incredibly like irksome, or like it didn't like ruin the movie for me, but I was like, okay, they're just very much showing that like, you know, death is crossing their path and sparing them this time. And they're going to continue going on with, I guess, to go somewhere and go dancing is the implication, in memory of, you know, his mother/grandmother. And it's like, okay, I kind of would have liked the movie just to go all the way and like culminate in like a dance sequence or something. Yeah. Like it was just, I don't know. The Pale Rider like didn't do much for me. I didn't really care. I understood that it was something that was mentioned 2 or 3 times throughout the movie. And I, you know, obviously I understand the symbolism of it all, but it's just kind of like, yeah, seeing inherently like this kind of white glowing eyes, you know, on a, you know, ethereal horse. It was just, I kind of shrugged. I was like, oh, okay. All right. Good enough.
Maybe it's his homage to Stephen King and the whole joke that Stephen King doesn't know how to end his stories. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to just have a messy ending too. And
I'm not going to lie. Even the Pale Rider himself, it kind of vaguely looked like Stephen King. Not close enough to be like it was actually like him. But it was like if Stephen King was like more gaunt and like a little bit older than he is, he'd probably fit that pretty well. But you know, it's I don't think that's explicitly what he was doing there. Now, Rowan, I think basically all I have left here is like running through all the kills, which I don't even know if at this point we really have to go through. I don't know if there was any specific
we went through most of them, yeah.
Yeah, we kind of covered a lot of them. I don't know if there was an explicit one that like stood out to you as being like your favorite, or
I mean, I thought they were all pretty fun. Like you said, like I really like the opening sequence just because, you know, it gets us in the vibe. I did like when his aunt dies and her like face catches on fire, and like
the fishing lures into like the putting the rubbing alcohol on it, the catching it on fire, to stumbling out the door and stepping on in a vase, I think, and, you know, impaling herself on the for sale sign. Yeah, Sarah Levy, I believe, who played all that.
Yeah.
There's 2 of my coworkers in this movie. We got Adam Scott and Sarah Levy.
Oh, there you go.
On shows that they're both in. So,
but yeah, I mean, I thought all the kills were pretty good. Like they were all, you know, in this world, they were all funny, and like you said, a lot of them like would have been referenced like a little while ago, and then that will happen to that person, and yeah, I thought it was pretty funny. What about you? What was like your top?
Yeah, for me, it's probably, I think, the smash cut to the uncle's death. And then basically being like, he died in a hunting accident, but like not what you'd expect. He got trampled by a herd of deer or whatever. And then it's like, you know, it shows them opening up kind of the body bag, and it's just like, I forget what they say, but it's like
cherry
like
pie,
strawberry pie or cherry
like
pie. Yeah. I thought that was great. And then, yeah, the aunt as well, like, you know, Sarah Levy's death, as we mentioned, it's just like so over the top and silly. It was the sort of thing where I was laughing along with that one, and the couple behind me was like, this is so stupid, what are we watching, sort of shit, you know, where they were just completely upset by the movie and then sat through the next hour and 10 minutes still. So yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing where there's stuff all over this that's like funny or interesting. A lot of it is like, you know, CGI crazy like blood mist stuff as well, but it's all kind of like in tone of the movie in terms of the deaths. I don't think that was ever kind of an issue for me at any real point.
So do I end my notes of the section just saying that don't ask me, I didn't see the trailer at the end because
oh yeah, I guess we can briefly mention that. I forgot. Yeah, we were having a conversation in the DMs that his next movie was supposed to be revealed at the end of Osgood Perkins' next movie, Keeper. We were supposed to get a trailer for that at the end.
I'll have to look it up tonight afterwards. So yeah, I was like, all right, well, I'll wait. And everyone had left. I'm the only one in there. And then next thing I know, they turned the lights on. I don't know if it was simultaneously or if they have a button for it. But when they turned the lights on, all the sound also went off. And it was just like a teenager. And then she just looked at me and she was like, oh, were you waiting to see the post-credit scene there. And I was like, oh, yeah, kind of. And she was like, oh, my bad. And then she was like, see ya. And then just kicked me out of the theater. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did not get to see it. So
That sounds like a great trailer. Yeah. For me, I sat through the whole credits. It was a black screen. I was like, okay, they're doing a fake out here. Maybe you got to wait a couple seconds. And no, I sat around for probably about another 10, 15 seconds. And then I started leaving the theater. And there was a couple of people that was like, I saw online there was supposed to be a trailer attached to this. And like they were grumbling as we were kind of like leaving
Osgood
the
Perkins himself put a video out. I saw
exactly
telling people
like
the way.
so people knew about it, and yeah, there was nothing for me either. All I know is that the movie is called Keeper, and Tatiana Maslany is, I think, starring in it. So,
which doesn't surprise me because I saw an interview that came out today. Osgood Perkins said that she was the best actor he has ever worked with, and how it was his favorite person to work with.
Listen, I know she's She-Hulk. But for me, when I saw her in Orphan Black all those years ago, and I hate watching TV, I suck at watching it. I only ever had to watch 2 or 3 episodes of that before I was like, she's got it. Like, she's an excellent actress. And, I don't think, like, her body of work really speaks for her acting ability. She should be everywhere. So if this helps propel her to even better things that aren't, She-Hulk, by all means, I'm sure I'll be there anyways, at the very least to check it out for this show. And even if not, I'd be in the theater checking that out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Keeper, whatever it may be.
You'll be first in line for She-Hulk, the movie.
Absolutely not. I don't think so. I think I'll be out on that one. I'll have to pass. But if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give The Monkey?
Yeah, I'm quite comfortable in giving this a yay. Like, there was enough of this that I really liked. I'm going to go on a limb. I mean, so far, what we've seen this year, or what I've seen this year between, like theater and streaming and all that, like, this is probably my favorite thing I've seen this year so far. I know it's still young as
very
a year.
Early, but yeah, I mean.
But I really enjoyed this. I overall like the tone. Like I said, I was kind of vibing with it. I love Osgood Perkins' eye. I think he has an incredible eye, and I think Neon's got one. So many of these directors have relationships with like A24. Neon just needs to like hold them really close and be like, stick with us, man, and keep this going.
This is like Neon's Ari Aster, pretty much. Yeah.
I feel like, if they can hold on to him and Brandon Cronenberg, like they're in a good space for, these weird like horror films. But yeah, I just thought this was a really good time. And like I said, it's so hard to find a Stephen King adaptation that is a good time and isn't, so bad that it's not even good. It's just bad, or you've got to go to someone like Stanley Kubrick that's just like totally, ignoring anything Stephen King about a story and just making it his own.
I mean, Mike Flanagan.
Well,
has quite a few Stephen King adaptation. I was going to say, like, we're not giving, Flanagan his due. He at least made some okay to good ones within, the last decade or so, for sure.
Yeah, Dr. Sleep is a banger. I will give him that. I am a big Dr. Sleep advocate, so.
I really like the Fall of House Usher, so,
yeah.
Which isn't Stephen King as I say that, so. I forgot that's Edgar Allan Poe, but,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, so you know what? Like, I think this one's good. I think this will, I'm going to hope do fairly good business, because I don't think it's, like, isolating enough to scare people away. And to me, I think it's kind of funny, because I think this is going to be far, like you said, the promotional aspect is not as grand as Long Legs. And, this isn't going to be like a box office smash like Long Legs was, which is kind of a shame, though, because I honestly think this is probably more accessible in general than Long Legs. I think the general public would like this more. There's lots of people in my theater that were on dates that, like, everyone in my theater seemed to have an awesome time with this. And just,
Nice.
We're like laughing and shocked at bodies exploding and just having a good time. And I mean, I think this is a very good example of a yay. This is like very, very good. Even my gripes with it, I still like, I'd watch this again. I had no issues with it. I thought it was a good time. What about you, Colton? What would you rate it?
So, of course, I'm coming in a little bit lower than you. Right after you say this is a very good example of a yay, I'm going to give it an okay. And that's largely for me. It's like this movie was so strong for the first 30 minutes and then, passable, to good, I would say, for the next 15 to 20. But like that third act and kind of like some of the melodrama we have to sit through to get to the credits, it was pretty painful, I would say. And just largely it's just like I didn't like Theo James in this at all. I thought he was like woefully miscast. So yeah, it's the sort of thing if this movie was largely the kids with Tatiana Maslany, or even, killing her off, after 40 minutes and passing them on to, the aunt and uncle, I think it just would have been a lot more successful for me. Maybe dealing it with like, the high school, or, well, I guess it wouldn't be high school kids, but the, middle school kids getting killed, some of these bullies and that sort of thing, I think would have been more fun. It's just, yeah, where this goes is just too campy, a little too over the top, and just, it kind of tread into that tone that I'm kind of allergic to. For me, it's like, this would probably be like just behind Companion for me, but what I'll say is this has higher highs. Like I felt 30 minutes into this movie that this was great.
Yeah.
Whereas Companion, the entire time I was like, this is okay. It was never doing anything that like truly wowed me. Yep. This is a little bit weirder, a little bit more over the top, takes bigger swings, and for that, like, I enjoyed it at, a little bit more at certain times. But overall, it's an okay purely on just that third act and, how it was like a slow slide into like, oh my God, this is just getting worse and worse for me. And if you're not following us already, you can follow us at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Bluesky, TikTok. If there's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds, Holly, Nicholas, Patrick, Mark, Stephen, Joy, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and James, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early. Be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Now, Rowan, you mentioned that you liked some of the music in this. Go ahead, plug the playlist. Anything making it?
Yeah, I gotta look. I already looked on Spotify. Nothing's up there yet. I've been finding this trend that there's like someone that always puts up, like they make it look real official. And it's like the soundtrack, and it's always the same like 30 white rapper rap songs of like,
nice.
But it's like always the same playlist. So I'm always curious if maybe, because when you look at that person's playlist, it's like they actually make real Spotify playlists. So I'm like, maybe they like reserve the name for the companies that are gonna have it out, and then it's just like a generic copy paste playlist till they actually get the music that up on the site. I don't know, but if I can find any of it, I'll probably put something there. I thought the music was pretty good in this, but you can find it at the It Slays Podcast Horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it on Spotify, you can go to any of the social media Colton just mentioned, click the Linktree link that's in the bio. It'll take you directly there. We upload scores or licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So follow the playlist. We update it regularly and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And for next time on the show, I don't think we really quite nailed down anything right yet. There's a few different movies kind of circling the March release, but I'm not really confident enough that they'll actually hit their dates or that they'll be playing at theaters near us. Rowan's looking.
I can't guarantee that I can get Colton in the theater to watch a kid's horror movie. So,
are you talking about like Night of the Zoopocalypse or whatever it is?
Clive Barker, baby.
Well, if that comes here, maybe I'll check that out. But yeah, it's the sort of thing where, I'm not sure what is releasing anytime soon that'll be worth discussing. There seems to be like a couple of smaller releases, or maybe we'll check out streaming, but just, nothing explicit just yet. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.